over in Anam Chuck, the Deputy Bríd Smith.
Agus Lála Bríd was a good fashion. This is my day, so I hope we get success with this topic. I'm going to use photographs here, Minister. I know which Minister has taken this, but I'm going to use photographs. I'm going to hand them to you when I'm leaving, because what I'm looking at here is the age-old question of mould and damp in local authority housing, and to remind us that in 2015 a landmark collective complaint against Ireland across 20 local authority estates was taken to the European Court, and in 2017 the European Court found Ireland guilty and insisted that there must be rapid and immediate changes made to local authority houses. Now, as late as last night, I visited Emmett Buildings in Dublin 8, and I also recently visited Oliver Bond flats. And to say that people are living in disgracefully damp and mouldy conditions is probably an understatement, which is why I want to hand you these photographs. They are really incredible. And I happen to be with a local school teacher, teaches in St. Bridget's National School in the Coombe, and she mentioned to me the level of absenteeism of children not being able to attend school because of the impact that mould and damp has on their health. And I have quotes here from the World Health Organization, from the NHS, and authorities such as this are looking at the question of mould and damp in local authority accommodation, poor accommodation, that is absolutely impacting on respiratory health, on the health of the skin, on the health of children in particular, but also on elderly people. And the loss of time out of school should be enough to wake up this government to the fact that these things need to be dealt with in a timely fashion. It's 5 years now since the European Court ruled on this, maybe going on 6 years now, and very, very little has changed for these tenants. And there are immediate solutions. We need better ventilations, they need new windows. Most of these flats still have single glazed windows, and they need a retrofitting programme. But at the very minimum, new windows and improved ventilation should be available to all of these local authority tenants. And when you ask Dublin City Council what they're going to do about it, and I have a question here from the Chief Executive, when I ask if there is a funding available in terms of climate action. This letter was the 17th of January. If there was funding available in terms of climate action targets and the need for health and safety in these flat complexes, what the Council can do about them. And they say there is no specific government fund available for window replacement. If additional funding becomes available, we can add more projects to the list. It's just not good enough. There needs to be funding made available, at least through the climate targets, to deal with this. There are a whole plethora of other issues to do with living in these complexes in the inner city. By the way, they're beautiful buildings. They would have won prizes back in the day, designed by Herbert George Sims. But there has been hints from the Council, at least, that these flats might go to the LDA, and the LDA would love to flatten them, because when you're in Emmett Buildings, you're surrounded by 12 and 14 stories of high-rise vulture fund built accommodation, either apart hotels, student accommodation or very expensive apartments, and more are planned. Now, this is not right to treat communities like this. They're the heart of the city. There's hundreds of families living in these conditions, and although regeneration is promised, it takes way too long to deal with very fundamental, basic health problems that these people face on a daily basis. So really what I want to tease out here today with you is what the government are going to do to insist that the local authorities step up to the mark and deliver people's health and safety in their dwellings.
I would like to thank Deputy Smith for raising this important issue. In accordance with Section 58 of the Housing Act 1966, local authorities are legally responsible for management and maintenance of their housing stock. Local authorities also have a legal obligation to ensure that all of their tenanted properties are compliant with the provisions of the Housing Standard for Rent Houses 2019. Minimum standards for rental accommodation are prescribed in the Housing Standard for Rent Houses Regulation 2019 and focus on tenant safety. They specify the specific requirements in relation to a range of matters such as ventilation, structural repair and fire safety, which you've already made reference to in terms of ventilation, sanitary facilities, heating and safety of gas, oil and electrical installations. These regulations apply to all properties let or available for let, including social housing. All landlords, including local authorities, have a legal obligation to ensure that their rented properties comply with the standards set down in the regulations. Local authorities take cases of mould very seriously. 81% of Dublin City Council social housing units were built before the introduction of the building regulations in 1991, and you made reference there were older buildings, many of them. Dwellings constructed prior to 1960 tend to have solid walls which are not very good at retaining heat. Dublin City Council are very keen to work closely with their tenants in helping to combat mould issues. In recent years, the Council has carried out various works to help eliminate condensation. Phase 1 of their energy efficiency programme, with funding from my department, saw 8,057 units upgraded with cavity walls and attics insulated. In Phase 2, a further 1,110 units had their facades wrapped and windows upgraded. 80% of the council stock has been upgraded by the end of 2022. The council voids programme, also with the department funding, saw 772 voids upgraded in 2022 to the housing standards for rented house regulations 2019. A housing condensation group was created by the council in 2017, which has carried out over 20,000 conditional surveys and damp reports in 2,500 units. Of these 2,500 units, mechanical ventilation has been installed in 1,300, which is just over 50% of them. Responsibility for enforcement of the regulations in the private rental sector, including approved housing bodies, properties, rests with relevant authorities. And you made reference there to Emmett Buildings and Oliver Bond Flats, right? So it's a matter we can take up with Dublin City Council as well, and maybe ensure that they go out and visit those particular places and the residents you speak about. We can't have children absent from school, as you made reference to. The government is committed to ensuring that a high-quality stock of rented accommodation is available for households who rent, be it in the private market or in accommodation provided directly by local authorities. Notwithstanding the legal obligation on local authorities to manage and maintain their housing stock, my department does, in a focused way, provide annual funding to local authorities to support their work in this area, mainly via the Disabled Persons Grant Scheme and the aforementioned Energy Efficiency Retrofit and Voids programme. My department continues to support local authorities in these focused stock improvement works, and to work is also ongoing with the local authority sector through the CCMA, the City and County Managers Association, to drive a planned maintenance approach to the management and maintenance of all local authority housing stock. Local authorities are entrusted with providing high quality housing stock to social housing tenants. The department is funding the development of a national asset management system for the sector that should greatly assist the sector in this task. And my department, there's a standing committee, a rental standing committee up and running with my department and a number of local authorities where they look at rental properties, and obviously that goes into dealing with with properties that the council themselves own as well. Dublin City Council are a member of that standing committee. They met in January. They'll be due again to meet in early March. And really, the matters you've written specifically in respect of the tenants in Emmett Buildings and Oliver Bond Flats, I'll take that up in my department and make direct contact with Dublin City Council.
Yeah, I mean, I could say, geez, I'm very encouraged by that answer, but I'm not. It's 6 years ago, and I repeat, since the European Court ruled against this state for the way local authority tenants are treated and the conditions they have to live in, specifically around damp and mould, sewage problems and others. But when you go into one of these estates, the problems run greater. You have rat infestation, you have, like I said, playgrounds aren't updated. They're working on soft playground stuff that's slippy and dangerous for the children. In the case of Emmett Buildings, there's no proper emergency access for ambulance or fire brigades. There's a huge amount of negligence, absolute negligence. But the fact that Ireland was found to be guilty on the damp and mould issue is really the one I want to get at here. And I have asked you a question, you haven't addressed it. Can we ensure that at least under climate action, funding is made available to upgrade all of the windows in these houses? Now, for that, you don't have to de-tenant the place. You don't have to go into a big urban regeneration project that lasts for a decade. You just get the stock to put in triple glazed, double glazed, triple glazed windows in every single flat, and it would make an absolutely huge difference to the quality of life and the level of mould and damp. And, state the obvious, it would help to improve people's income in a cost of living crisis where they're paying a fortune to keep their flats warm. So that's one specific question I'd like you to address, to try and get climate funding to deal with this issue of the windows and to ensure that proper ventilation is installed in every apartment. Beyond that, if you are meeting Dublin City Council, they do have to deal with rat infestation in many of these blocks, and some of it happens because there's buildings being erected all around them, but it's not being dealt with. There's no responses that are worth a damn. And people, as I say, very decent families, very decent communities are living with this day in, day out. Children are missing school. The health levels are very, very low.
On your specific issue, Dublin City Council has received funding, state funding, in terms, in phase 2, they did, in terms of the energy efficiency schemes in phase 1, with funding from my department, saw 8,057 upgraded with cavity walls and attics installations. And in phase 2, a further 1,110 units had their facades wrapped and windows upgraded. 80% of the house has been upgraded by the end of 2022. So it's a matter we'll take up with Dublin City Council, but they're the facts. Now, if there are particular instances of particular buildings where to date that hasn't happened, well, obviously that's a matter for Dublin City Council. It's a matter we will take up with them, and we look at what funding is required. But they're the facts as presented from Dublin City Council. So state funding is being provided under the areas you speak about. It's a question of, are there buildings still to be dealt with in that regard? You've mentioned 2 buildings, and they're Emmett buildings and Oliver Bond flats, which it's a matter we will take up with Dublin City Council. But to say that there isn't state funding being provided for this area, there is.